The wind howled across the frozen camp like it had teeth. Barbed wire fences rattled softly under the weight of fresh snow, and the wooden guard towers stood silent against the pale gray sky. The war felt far away here. No artillery, no bombers, no burning cities, just endless white wilderness. For the German women inside the POW compound, Canada felt like another planet. They had been captured months earlier in Europe. Radio operators, medics, clerks. None of them had expected to be shipped across the ocean to a land they'd only seen on maps and school books. Forests, lakes, cold, so much cold. Every morning followed the same routine. Roll call, rations, work assignments. Some knitted, some cooked, some cleaned snow from walkways that would be buried again by morning. It was quiet, too quiet. That afternoon, a transport truck arrived beyond the outer fence. New supplies, maybe new prisoners. No one knew. The women gathered near the barracks windows, pretending not to stare. Then they heard it. Laughter. Male voices. Close. Right outside the perimeter fence. One of the women, Marta, froze mid-step. "Nine, that's not how you say it," a man said, chuckling. In German. Perfect German. Another voice replied, also in German. Fluent, relaxed, casual, not a guard shouting orders, not a prisoner whispering behind wire. Locals. The women rushed to the window. Beyond the fence line, several men in heavy winter coats were unloading crates from the truck. One wore a wool cap with a maple leaf badge. Another smoked while talking, gesturing with his hands as if telling a story back home. But they weren't from home. They were Canadian. One of the prisoners whispered, almost to herself, "Das ist nicht Canada." This isn't Canada. How could they speak like that? Not broken phrases, not classroom German. Native. The women looked at one another. Confusion turned into unease. Had Germany sent people here before the war? Were there secret communities, sympathizers, immigrants, or worse? Did the Canadians understand everything the prisoners said inside the camp? That night, the barracks were louder than usual. The women spoke in hushed voices, suddenly aware that their language might not be private anymore. Across the yard, one of the Canadian workers laughed again. The sound carried easily in the cold air, and this time everyone inside the camp understood every word. They just didn't know why. By the next morning, the entire barracks was on edge. No one said it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. If they understand us, what else do they know? The women went about their assigned duties more quietly than usual. Conversations that had once flowed freely in German were now cut short, replaced by careful glances toward the yard. That afternoon, Marta and Liesel were assigned to shovel snow along the inner fence line, the section closest to where the Canadian workers had been unloading supplies the day before. The snow was packed hard, the air sharp in their lungs. Their boots crunched loudly in the silence. Then they heard it again. "Ja, aber meine Großmutter kam aus Hamburg," a male voice said. Yes, but my grandmother came from Hamburg. The women froze. Just beyond the outer fence, two Canadian laborers were stacking wooden crates. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, red scarf around his neck, was speaking fluent German again. Not stiff, not formal, familiar. Liesel slowly lifted her head. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are they speaking our language?" Marta swallowed, then did something bold. She stepped closer to the fence. A guard in the tower glanced down but didn't shout. The women were still inside their work area, still following rules. Marta cleared her throat. "Warum sprechen Sie Deutsch?" "Why do you speak German?" The workers stopped. The tall man turned, surprised, not alarmed. He looked at her, then at the striped uniform, the number sewn on her chest. For a moment, the war disappeared from his face. "My parents," he replied in German, his accent soft but real. "They came to Canada before I was born." The other worker added with a half-smile, "There are many of us here. Farmers, loggers, mechanics. We didn't leave our language behind." The women stared. This land they thought was foreign, had pieces of home hidden inside it. Liesel stepped forward. Do you hate us?" The question hung in the air, fragile as ice. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted toward the guard tower, then back to the women. "We're not soldiers," he said quietly. "We work. We live. That's all." A shout broke the moment. "Back to work!" A Canadian guard waved from the yard, not angry, just reminding them of the invisible line that couldn't be crossed. The workers turned back to their crates. The women returned to their shovels. But everything had changed. That night, the barracks felt different. Not safer, not more dangerous, just smaller. Because now they knew. Their words were never as private as they thought, and the world beyond the fence was more complicated than enemy and ally. After the conversation at the fence, nothing looked the same. The snow was still white. The guards still walked their routes. The barbed wire still cut the horizon into sharp, unforgiving lines. But the world felt closer. Inside the barracks, the women spoke more softly now, not out of fear, but awareness. The illusion that their language belonged only to them had melted like frost in sunlight. Canada was no longer just wilderness and uniforms. It had voices, familiar ones. A few days later, work detail brought several prisoners back to the same fence line. The German-speaking workers were there again, repairing a supply sled. No one planned to speak. But when Marta slipped on the ice, one of the men instinctively called out, "Vorsicht!" Careful. She caught herself and looked up. For a second, they locked eyes again. No smiles, no waves, just recognition. Two people who might have shared a train platform, a bakery line, a village street, in another life. A guard's boots crunched nearby, and the moment passed. That evening, Liesel sat on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. "They built lives here," she said quietly. "Families, farms, workshops." Marta nodded. "And we brought the war with us." Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees beyond the camp. The same trees those immigrants had probably worked in long before the uniforms, the fences, the watchtowers. The language had crossed the ocean before the war did. And it had stayed. Not as a weapon, not as a secret, just as memory. Weeks later, when the workers no longer came to that section of fence, the women still listened sometimes when the wind carried distant voices across the snow. They never heard those men again, but they never forgot the moment they realized. The world was bigger than the sides they'd been told to stand on, and sometimes, even in a prison camp, humanity spoke in a familiar voice.